Welcome to Unleash in a Goldilocks, How to Get It Just Right. Thank you so much for joining us for another insightful and exciting conversation. In honor of Women's History Month and women, because today the whole world is in a place where it's not just historically what women did, but what are women doing today to make history and shape the trajectory of the world and our future leaders. That is going to be the crux of the conversation. And to have this free-flowing dialogue, our friends of the Goldilocks community, my co-host from Women Investing in Women, Robin, and my all-time friend and a friend of Goldilocks show, Mark Papadas. Welcome, and it is lovely to have both of you to have this conversation. So as we get started, Robin, I am going to give you the opportunity to talk about what is sitting on you and coming up for you when we talk about women's role in creating sustainable social impact, and where do we see a woman's role today and where is it going? And let's talk about not just in the US context, but in a global context as well.
Well, this is a very interesting conversation, given everything that's been going on in the US and the world. I believe that most, if not all, of the very pro-social movements around the world and around the country were, if not started, were definitely moved forward by women. For example, take the abolition, the anti-slavery movement. Obviously, there were many, many men involved because men at the time had the power to enact the laws, but it was many of the women enabling that to go forward and speaking out very strongly. You look at the women's rights movement, the suffrage movement in the United States, we're giving women the vote, the actual power to effect change. And it was done by women. You look at the civil rights movement in the United States. So I believe that women carry a very powerful role in bringing about social change. Also, looking back at, for example, the decades-long war in Ireland was brought to an end by the mothers, the Protestant mothers and the Catholic mothers coming together and saying, basta, enough. And it was the women speaking out. So I absolutely do believe that women have a very powerful voice and should use that voice in bringing about good for society. So absolutely.
Thank you, Robin. Go ahead, Mark. Would love to hear a male perspective. A girl dad, right? You have two daughters. Yep. So, and you have grandkids. So go ahead and talk about what it feels from your perspective.
Well, as you know me well enough, I look at things more from the individual's perspective. So in other words, that it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're a man or a woman, it's the person who makes the decision. And just like, whether you're talking male or female, whether you're talking racially, that none of the groups are a monolith that they all do everything the exact same way. And I think back to some friends that I have who are women who, the joke that we had between us was that they have a lot of man in them. In other words, that they do things the way that men do them. They see things the way that men see them. And that's why sometimes they don't get along with other women quite as well. So to me, it's much more about the individual, that as a, I don't want to say so much as a rule, that as a whole, throughout history, like you were talking about, Robin, is that women have been more of the, the nurturers, the feelers, if you will, of wanting to move these things forward. And then the men have always been perceived, and then therefore probably felt like they had to fill the role of the quote unquote the alpha male, right? The one who's in charge, who's in the lead, etc. And I think what I believe that I'm seeing is that a lot of those roles are not so much changing either way. So in other words, it's not like that women are becoming the dominant and that the men are becoming subservient. But I think we're seeing a lot of blending of those different things, and that at least the lot of the men that I know are willing to, I don't want to say so much give up, but they're willing to step back a little bit to allow women to come up, and allow is not the right word to use there, but to bring women up to that same level. But then the flip side of that is, once again, not being monolithic. There's a lot of women who don't want that. For every woman who fights for women's empowerment, there's another one who's saying, no, I don't want that. I want to, stay at home and be a mom. And I don't think that either choice is wrong. Again, it's up to that individual of what they think is best for them and for their family.
So interesting, listening to both of you, what's coming up for me is we as humans, we all have the masculinity and femininity energy in us. Whether we go back to Hofstadter's cultural dimensions or we go back to the Eastern philosophy of yin and yang, we all embody masculinity and femininity energy. Masculinity energy is goal setting and strategic and driving results and realizing outcomes. Femininity energy is nurturing, caregiving, kindness, compassion that is socially and familially sustaining, right? So we all have both of these, but the traditional definition is that men have to embody 100% masculinity and women have to embody 100% femininity. And that's not possible because that is not how God and nature have created us, right? So we're all different because that masculinity, femininity energy is fluid in each of us. But having said that, being a housewife is not about losing my empowerment as a woman. Being a housewife is about being a CEO, CFO, CHRO, everything for the household, and making sure the nucleus, the primary building block of society, is built right so that the society is functional. Before the Western colonial age, work was defined based on regular physics. You expend energy, you create outcome, you have worked. There was value for the work women did. The colonial era then said, women, you stay at home and do what you do, but you're not producing anything for our colonial powers to profit and enrich ourselves. So what you do is not work. We're going to enslave the men, and they're going to produce products that we can commercially sell. And therefore, they are doing work, and then we take the profits and enrich our colonial principalities, right? That's where the modern day's definition of work came. To this day, the work women do every day for no pay is worth more than $1 billion. So anytime when I hear people say, women don't want to work, they want to stay home, that is actually insulting to women. If men have to have their periods and go through a pregnancy, we will never have childbirth, okay? To think that suffering through all of that is not work. Men have a headache, men get fever, and then we have a problem in the house, right? So to say that what women do is not work, if men have to pay for surrogacy, to clean the house, to cook, to do the dishes, raise their children, men can't afford. Women, from a financial economic contribution perspective, make $250,000 to $300,000 a year being a full-time housewife. Okay, so I really want our audience to understand being a housewife is not less than, it is actually work. The masculine driven social construct doesn't reward you for it, doesn't recognize you for it. And you're also in a position where you don't handle money, you don't know money, and therefore you're at the mercy of your husband. And what happens if the husband gets sick? Imagine my family situation. My husband has been terminally ill for 12 years. If I was a stay-at-home mom and I believed that that's all I want to do, then what do? Leave my husband and go find another man to provide for me? How does the society function? I am struggling to understand this construct of empowerment is women going out to work, and disempowerment is a choice women make for not going to work and staying at home. All of this is masculine definitions because we women don't think about it that way. So Robin, how do you see this whole thing transpiring? Because life is always evolving. And those who feel diminished will always fight back. Women didn't have the right to even open bank accounts till the 70s. They were able to actually, after the laws were passed, to facilitate opening banks and having credit. It didn't happen till the mid 80s. So how does all of this sound and feel like when our daughters and granddaughters could be going back to the old age of women don't work, old age meaning the colonial era?
Yeah. Well, I am actually a living witness of that. First of all, I'm the youngest of 8 children, and I have 3 daughters, and I'm very glad that my mother had 8 children and not 7. and I wanted lots of children. I was blessed with 3. If I would have been blessed with more, I would have absolutely loved that. And I have an MBA. And even though I had an MBA, I was very committed to being a stay-at-home mom and raising my children. I did not want to have to send them to, a nanny. I wanted to raise them myself. So I was a stay-at-home mom after I got married, and I was worked for a little bit, and then was after work. Look at me, worked a little bit. Then was a stay-at-home mom for like 15 years, and then began working a little bit part-time, and then working more. Well, if you look at my Social Security, I'm getting 1/3 of the Social Security that I would have gotten if I had then sent my children to daycare and had a job. And so I look at all those years on my Social Security report that says 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So I am living the reality that my contribution to society of raising 3 amazing daughters, who themselves, my one daughter has a PhD in math, both daughters have graduated from college, are being very productive human beings. That my helping to do that has 0 value, 0. And so I am living what you were talking about. So at any rate, I believe that, and I have absolutely, I don't share this a lot, just because it hasn't come up, but I became a stay-at-home housewife before I had children. Before I even got pregnant, my husband and I chose for me to stay home. And I remember when people would ask me, what do you do? At first, I would sometimes I'd like make up something instead of just saying I'm a housewife. I like trying to make up something that I was doing, because society is so ingrained that unless you are outside working, doing something that brings in money, that you don't have value. And so I am a living example of what you're talking about. What's funny is when my oldest daughter, her husband was an author, and so in the years as he was getting his work going, she was working outside the home and loved it and wanted to continue doing that even after they had children, and that was fantastic. She had the ability to do that. Well, then it came a time where she lost her employment for a period of time, and so then took over some of the duties that her husband was doing, because he was an author. He was a stay-at-home, writing, working from home, but he would take over a lot of those duties of getting the kids dressed, staying out the door to school, etc. So she began taking over all those duties and commented, wow, this is like a lot of work. Being a stay-at-home mom is like a lot of work. And she had always fully appreciated, and they have a very equal partnership, both of them helping doing everything. But yeah, I am a lived experience, and I believe that society absolutely does not value what women do. And so I've been going on for long enough. So anyway, I know what you're saying.
Thank you, Robin. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, you guys are inadvertently touching on something that means it's very important to me when we start talking about language. And we find that a lot of words that had a specific meaning for quite some time then become kind of hijacked or bastardized to mean something different that some group, some person that they want it to mean. So that the understanding that a lot of people have for that word then changes over time. So like when you're talking about different things like work and value, I think that more people do value the work that women do. I just don't think they get enough voice or enough amplification of that voice throughout society, in the media, etc. When we were talking about the empowerment, to me, I don't think there's enough, not necessarily, there's probably not enough empowerment amongst women within themselves. So when we first started the conversation about, like, you guys, you made choices, so you had that empowerment to make those choices to do what was right for you and for your family. It's the women who don't have the ability to make that choice, that they're either born into a situation or they haven't had the opportunity to learn enough, to experience enough to have that empowerment to make a choice for themselves, and they're just told this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it, and if you don't like it, that's too damn bad because you haven't learned enough to where you can go out and quote unquote work for somebody else, provide value, get that income kind of thing. So that's why empowerment is so important to me when dealing with kids, is because if we can get that empowerment into girls at a young age, they will become empowered women. It's so much harder to get that empowerment to women once they're already grown, because a lot of those thought processes, those patterns, pretty much their life trajectory is set. And it's not that it's not changeable, it's just that they don't necessarily know how to change it or that they even can.
True. And appreciate the work you do through I Am for Kids, Mark, something I have supported from day one. So happy to be part of that whole movement. And you're right, words have meaning. Language is culture. So I come from a culture where the oldest daughter is raised to be the head of the household. Women don't get married until they have a career and they have a home. And when we get married, our husband moves into our home where our parents are, so that the protection is for the women. The first elected female head of state in the entire world came out of Sri Lanka in 1960. We're a matriarchal society that was also polyandry. My people took multiple husbands because women build the fabric of society men go and bring home the bacon, right? So you need more men to provide for a family, and women can have multiple husbands to have multiple children, right? All of that got destroyed when we became a European colony. But the rest of the culture still remains. We marry once, but we're still the head of the household. So I come from a society where women are not less than, they're equal, and they're raised to be leaders. Fast forward, I come to the United States, everybody thinks I'm Dr. Henry's secretary, because how could a 32-year-old be a CFO, right? So here I am sitting at my first job at AT&T, and it's a budget meeting. I'm the head of finance, and they say, Cass, we need to get some bodies. How are you going to get us some bodies? So I'm not a native English speaker, right? English is my third language. I said to myself, I'm going to have a little fun with this. So I turned around and said, have you tried the morgue? And they said, why? I said, you were asking for bodies. That's the only place I know where the bodies are before they're buried or cremated. So where else would you go? And then they laughed, and then they said, oh, you poor Cass, you don't know the American way. Bodies means people. And they gave me this whole spiel. So I listened, and I said, okay, so if you want bodies, do you care it's connected to a brain that can solve problems? Do you care it contains a heart that can care enough to do right for the business and the constituents we serve? And they all looked at me stunned. And I said, can you do me a favor? Yes, I am foreign, but language is culture. How we refer to our people is how we are culturally setting up this organization to treat people. If we talk about them as bodies, we're going to treat them as butts on seats and not actual humans. So at least for my sake, can we start referring to them as our team members, as actual humans? Language is culture. And when we give different meanings, we are changing culture. And I would not brush it off as it took a different meaning. It is intentionally designed to subvert society. When I grew up, all the books ended with they were merry and gay. It was a perfectly good word, right? So we bastardize things and we give them meanings to alienate certain things, and then we say it's just a meaning. No, our words are informed by our thoughts, right? Our thoughts become our words drive our actions create behavior and our habits and our values, which then become our destiny. So where we are today as the United States is the destiny based on our thoughts and our words over the last 50, 60, 100 years. We didn't come here accidentally. This was intentionally taken and unconsciously traveled, both.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I referenced my daughter, and after she was let go of her work, she took some time off, and she is now starting a company, has started a company. In fact, she's going to be a guest on our Women Investing in Women podcast next week. It's called Equal Partnerships and Mental Load. And she and her husband have created an amazing relationship and partnership where you look at your family life, your marriage relationship and your family life as a whole, and what does it take to sustain that in a meaningful way. And the example of, okay, you know, you're going to make dinner. Okay, well, you also then have to think about, okay, I have to get the meat out of the freezer ahead of time to be able to make. I need, or you're going to plan Christmas. You know, you're gonna have Christmas. Well, having Christmas involves a lot more than just opening the presents on Christmas morning. It involves, you know, shopping ahead of time, wrapping, you know, buying extra food or planning extra parties or whatever. There's a lot that goes into it. And as she was describing all this, and I was kind of mentally going through my mental checklist, it's like, oh yeah, I can do that at the drop of the hat because I've done it so much that I can just boom, 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 do all this stuff. Because if you stop and you list out all of the things that are involved in running a household, in raising children, it's massive. And so how can we sit down as husband and wife, as partners, and say, how can we divide this in a way that feels more fair to both of us, as opposed to mom coming home and then doing everything else in the house while dad sits and watches TV or reads a newspaper? How can we divide up all of these tasks in a way that is more equitable? So it's equitable maybe it's equitable partnerships. Anyway, but what's interesting is now her business is teaching other couples how to accomplish that, what she and her husband have accomplished. It's really, really remarkable.
So I'm so happy to hear you say that, Robin, because ultimately all aspects of life is successful when we can collaborate and partner, right? Whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's friendship. And I always say, if we can show up as accountability partners, and that takes two elements. One, hold a mirror to the other person and show them their greatness, their goodness, their value, and how that serves the world and why they're important. And the other is being their blind spot watcher and making sure they're taking perspective. When two people can do this for each other, and then a group of two people can do it among their groups and across for each other, we build a more mindful society. We build a more perspective-taking society, which goes to the heart of what Goldilocks is, right? Research shows that if each of us believed what we believed and put a stake and stood in those corners, right? We can all only influence 3 levels from where we are. So if I'm at the extreme right, I can only influence 3 levels towards the center. If I'm on the extreme left, I can only influence 3 levels towards the center. But if everybody took perspective and moved towards the center, now we can have 7 degrees of influence, because I have 3 degrees to my right, 3 degrees to my left, and everybody else in the middle. So even for the most selfish reasons, if we are pursuing economic success, influential success, power, whatever, it behooves us to move to the middle and take perspective. So Mark, how do you see us being able to move society to get there? Because giving children the tools is one thing, but when they go home and they are in society and they see things, they are being conditioned. The reason I ask this question is I used to walk from graduate housing to a campus in Indiana, in Terre Haute, Indiana, and I used to cut across the middle school for kids. And in every classroom on the drop ceiling, just for the teacher to see, they had a sign. Who you are speaks so loud, the children are not listening to a word of what you're saying. It's a reminder to the teachers to show up and role model. So how can I Am for Kids and the work you're doing translate into creating role models to influence children? Because no matter how much we say, they're going to learn from what they experience.
So I'm glad you asked that, because I believe that pretty much all parents, there's probably maybe 4 or 5% who don't want this, but pretty much all parents want what's best for their kids. The issue that they have is that they don't know how to deliver that to their kids. And that's really where we come in. And that's why really what I Am for Kids is all about is not just for the kids. That's where the starting point is. But we know that the parents want these things for the kids. So now I have content and education for the parents, so that every parent wants their kid to have that empowering I am statement, right? And if the kid asks the parent and they don't have one, then, pardon my language, but then the kid knows that the parent's full of crap, right? So if 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 you want something for the kid, you have to, like you said, you have to model it yourself. So that's why a lot of the social media stuff that I put out right now is geared towards the parents. Taking that a step further, I'm a big believer in the value of of edutainment. In other words, of getting through to people in an entertaining way as opposed to simply dumping knowledge upon them. Because I don't care how effective of an instructor you are in a class of X number of people, certain percentages are only going to absorb so much of it, regardless of how good you are at delivering it. But if you can do it in such a way where it's educational and entertaining, where people seek it out and maybe watch it over and over again because they're enjoying it, then they're going to get pieces every time that they watch it. So that's where we're developing the different TV shows, the animated shows for kids. We've got some talk shows that are, on the back burner as far as development once we get the kids TV show launched. But making it so that these things are engaging so that people want to partake in them, and then being able to see the results of that. So that's part of why, for example, the animated TV show that we're developing is we're showing real stories of real kids who are making an impact. The heck with the parents. Here's some role models that the kids can, like, I look just like that kid. That kid's the same age as I am. If he or she can do it, then I can do it too. And I'm learning how to get this empowering identity, and I want to go after this. So then they start to believe in it, and it literally is that, kind of like the mastermind type of thing, that there's a mindset amongst a group of people who are not even necessarily working towards the same thing, but have that similar mindset that synergistically create connections that would never have existed if not for that group.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. I'm glad you shared that, Mark. And as we get ready to close, because time flies fast, I want to start with you, go in reverse. I know you focus on individualism. You believe in that individual growing up to be what they are meant to be. But society requires the collectivism to function. No matter how individualistic we are, when we go to work, we need to function as a team. When we are in country, we have to function as society. In a family, we have to function as part of a nuclear family. So if we are only giving individuals their right to be individuals, then we're not teaching them compromise. We're not teaching them optimization, which is the foundation for business success and economic success, right? We optimize everything in business. So where do you see the overlapping and the introduction of societal norms and societal interaction and the collectivist team approach? Because it has to be a good balance.
So it's glad you asked that. So for example, in my identity building process, the one of the steps is to share and synergize your identity. So it's human nature for us to want to be a part of something that is bigger than just ourselves. So that's basically how cliques and gangs, but also positive things come into play. So if you've developed that individual part of it, of who I am, right, and the standards that I set for myself, so now you're going to congregate with other people who have that similar mindset of improving yourself and therefore improving basically everything else around them. That's when that whole mastermind part of it comes in. And then the fifth step, the final step of the identity building process is to live that identity, to be that person. And the lifelong homework for that is to have a project that embodies the identity that you've created for yourself. And the only rule that we put on that project is that it has to benefit somebody other than just yourself. So these kids come up with these amazing and creative ideas because they don't have to learn to think out of the box because they haven't built the box yet in their mind to think outside of, right? And a lot of time they're entrepreneurial because they want to achieve something. And then when they start working together with other people, that's where what you're talking about, that whole societal impact. And in case you and any of the watchers haven't figured it out yet, I Am for Kids is my I Am project.
So what is your closing thoughts for women, Mark? This is a month celebrating women. Technically, we should be celebrating women every day. But because as a society we don't, we have relegated a month. So what is your message to women?
I would, to be you. Again, men, women, doesn't really matter, is to decide for yourself who you are, what you want, who you want to do it with. That like you were talking about with the yin and yang, the energies that you put out into the world and that you either mirror or fill in the gaps of your partner. Just, I guess it's like, yeah, just be you, be the best woman that you can be, and whatever that definition is for you and in your family.
Thank you, Mark. Turning over to you, Robin.
Okay, so this is very interesting. I would say to women to value who you are independently of what you do. That you have value, even if you were just sitting on the couch reading a book, you have value as much as if you were, sitting in the middle of a CFO meeting. And so being able to identify and truly tap into your value as a human being, your value of bringing good to the world, and independent of the amount of dollars you bring to the world, or the social labels or economic labels that you might be associated with. I think that when we can really tap into our value as a human being and the goodness that we bring to the world, independent from any dollar signs that might be attached to that, I think that is truly valuable.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you so much, Mark. This has been an amazing conversation. As I bring this to a close, I would be remiss if I didn't remind all of us we're living in the United States in a currently self-proclaimed Western Christian nation and not raised in a Christian society. But I look at the Christian belief and the faith and everything that comes with it. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit still needed a human womb for Jesus to be born. That tells us that even in the Western Christian tradition, the human woman has a very sacred place. Sacred. I intentionally use that word sacred. So when you denigrate a woman directly and indirectly with euphemisms, you're denigrating that who gave birth to the person or the God you worship. Consider the source. The source is always the woman. Woman is the creator. Man gives her a sperm, she makes a baby. If a woman gave a man an egg, he can't make a baby, right? So nature has created women to be the caretakers of the species and the civilization. If nature and God intended, and if you truly claim to be spiritual, then honor it. How you treat a woman is truly a reflection of who you are. And when you denigrate a woman, it reminds us how insecure and insignificant you are. And it's not a reflection of the women, it's a reflection of you. And so I would love to remind everybody, you're all here because of a mother carried you to term. You all have children because the woman in your life carried your sperm to term, right? So honor that. It is paid and rewarded with sweat, blood, and tears, and that is sacred. And regardless of culture, the feminine energy is the nurturing energy. It behooves all of us to honor that femininity inside of us, give that femininity its rightful place. Life is not a competition. Life is a cooperative endeavor. So let's hold hands and cooperate and build a better world, because it's only together we go further. If half of us are not given an opportunity, the other half of us are going to get dragged down anyway. And so let's make sure we come together to build a world that serves us, and we show our children how it's done instead of our children saying, you don't know this, we're going to build it a different way. So wish everybody an amazing month of March. And let's make sure we celebrate women, the women who've given us life, the women who've educated us, the women who've nurtured us, and the good men who stand by them and make sure that they're protected and supported.